visual language that I'm describing. But often, especially in this last film, which is set in art school, he never went to art school, and so he's sort of relying on me to fill in these details. And I'd get to the set, and certain things would be just perfect, and then there'd be something absolutely wrong. We'd have to, what are you doing here, you fools? and it's it's very easy to let these things get out of your control.
Yeah. Well, it also, for a novelist, just to continue answering your question a little bit more, it brings me up against the limits of how much visualization I actually do, because I think that even when I'm doing what seems like visual description, scene painting, I couldn't account with my sort of mind's eye for everything that's on the page. It's really still about the ear. It's about what the words evoke, and I think every person who reads even the most detailed page of verbal description of a scene, a visual scene by a novelist, comes up with a completely different picture.
Sure. I mean, what would be your feeling if you were to send wrong art for this story? Something that's totally wrong. Would you say, get this out of here?
Well, I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. I'm waiting to see the results of a first script, but what's very interesting to me is that I sort of expect there to be a feedback process where I'm influenced and the story is altered by Farrell's interpretation.
Sorry, you've done your work in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Slam!
It also reminds me of another thing that I'm keen on asking about, which you alluded to when you said that as you wrote Ghost World, you realized people were tolerating Enid's pronouncements. And that is that you do your work, and you continue to, even with Ice Storm, Harvest, you produce it in installments, and it's in print. Portions of it are in print before you've committed to the whole work. It's like a novel. It's like being Charles Dickens, a novelist who works in installments, which is very uncommon anymore in what I do. And I'm terribly curious about how much of the project changes according to informational material or responses that comes back at you once you've got an issue or two in print.
Well, I mean, Ice Haven was essentially the entire story in comic book form. And once my intent was to do it, was to create a perfect comic book. I had been reading all these old Sunday newspaper sections from like 1950, and I just loved the way that Blondie would appear with Prince Valiant, and then Mutt and Jeff, and then Mary Ward. Yet they all seem somehow interrelated because they're drawn with basically the same tools and the same sort of concepts of cartooning, and by the same sort of class of people, and they're printed with the same four-color press, and yet they're not related. But I love that idea that you could somehow take that variety of styles and integrate them into something. How neat it would be to notice that in Mary Ward, Henry's book was left on the counter or something. And so that was my initial impetus for that. And I tried to create this kind of perfect comic book, and then when I got the actual comic back from the printer, it didn't feel right. It didn't have the right. I don't know. I liked it, but it didn't work perfectly for me. And then all of a sudden, I started to hatch the idea of redoing it as a book and kind of adding to it a little bit, giving it some breathing room. And I had drawn the original art so large that I actually had to cut the pages in half and fold them on a hinge. And so I've been looking at the pages, kind of as half pages, and somehow they didn't look right as whole pages. So that was my main impetus to make them then, this sort of half-page book. And I wanted it to have the feel of one of those old Peanuts collections where they were in a horizontal format.
Yeah, well, it's one of the nicest things they've done with the Peanuts reissues is retain that horizontal
very stability to it. That horizontal.
Yeah. One of the things I like so much in Ice Haven is the way you seem to be finding a way simultaneously to break down your impulses into all these different, distribute them into all these different categories. The mayhem and violence of the Blue Bunny sequence, the sort of extremely moody, thoughtful, pensive street scenes. They're all distributed into these different comics that announce themselves as having different titles, but then again they're folded together into this master narrative that you can't quite ever grasp.